We're starting the show this morning with the findings of a new report that says that of 13 countries in the entire Asia-Pacific region, India is #1 in generative AI adoption across the region. 93% of students, 83% of employees in our country actively engage with Gen AI.
But hold on, what exactly is Gen AI? We're of course going to tell you that, but we thought let's give this a little bit of a twist. How about hearing about generative AI from generative AI? So we typed in a few things with everybody's favorite now, ChatGPT, to see what exactly it threw up. Take a look at this and then we'll get you more.
We sat down in Delhi and Mumbai and gave ChatGPT a whirl. It's available totally free online, so we just pulled up the website. First, we put forward the simple question. Write an anchor link explaining what is generative AI and how is India adapting to it. But the answer we got was way too long. So we asked ChatGPT to make it a little shorter. Then we asked it to pepper in some real-world examples. And finally, adding a touch of humor. The whole process took us just a few minutes. But would it live up to TBC standards? The only way to know was to give it a try.
All right, so we had ChatGPT do a part of our job this morning and it did throw up a version. Let's try and tell you what that was. Okay, so generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI as it's called, is like the Picasso of digital age, splattering creativity everywhere. Unlike old school AI, this one's got its own flair. It can whip up content faster than you can say, Bob's your uncle, from churning out images that'll make your eyeballs do a double take to composing tunes that'll have Mozart tipping like his hat as well. Generative AI is the wizard behind the curtains of creativity.
India's not one to miss out on the fun. Picture this. AI is helping advertisers cook up campaigns so spicy you'll want seconds. And in the land of Bollywood, it's not just the stars shining the special effects, courtesy of generative AI, are out of this world. Oh, and who could forget about healthcare? AI is not just playing doctor, it's speeding up drug discovery faster than you can say achoo. With India's tech whizzes and startup hustle, the generative AI scene is hotter than a Mumbai summer. So buckle up, folks. We're in for a wild ride on the AI Express, and India's driving the innovation train. Okay, so this is what ChatGPT gave us as a read.
Yeah, so that was ChatGPT. Let's come back to human conversations now, right? So when we did, just an observation here, when we did write into ChatGPT and we asked for cues, it had different answers and not all the time the answers were similar. For example, what I wrote in Mumbai versus what Toya wrote in Delhi was very different. Also, it some ways felt that one of the greatest tips, if I can share, that we've got ever on ChatGPT or on generative AI is that if you use it to elevate your work and not delegate your work, that's when it actually throws in the best results.
Right, even I felt in the definition we just read out, it felt like we read a lot of words, but I'm not sure if we actually said anything. You know, I don't know if we actually conveyed a meaning to our audience.
Yeah, well, thankfully, ChatGPT is not there just yet. But luckily for us, we have a far more concrete, person with far more concrete knowledge on this come on the program and break it down for us. We have Anjani Kumar, partner at Deloitte, on the program with us this morning. Good morning, Anjani. Thanks so much for joining us. First question really is to understand what are the key takeaways from the report that Deloitte has put out that talks about India's interaction with generative AI and such massive adoption happening here.
Thank you for inviting me to the show. Just to give you and the viewers a bit more context on the survey, we actually surveyed about 11,900 students and employees across Asia Pacific. And these employees were across all industries and students were across all fields of study so that we could get a holistic impact of Gen AI. What was really surprising, and positively so, about 93% of students in India and 83% of employees are actively engaging with Gen AI. What's also very encouraging is the fact that people and students are looking at Gen AI in a very constructive manner. What I mean by that is when we specifically double down on how they think Gen AI will impact India, they spoke about better access to training, better education, and better healthcare. When we again look down at what are the benefits that Gen AI is generating for students as well as for employees, the top three benefits that Indian respondents in the survey called out was one, increased speed of completing tasks, improved quality of outputs, and third, increased ability to generate new ideas.
Anjani, why do you think it is that Indians take to Gen AI tech as easily as we do? Those numbers are very high.
So I think there are two or three big elements. Is just the general population mix. If you look at India as a country, we have about 50% of our population, which is 25 years or old, or lower. And that also got reflected in our respondent mix. So for example, when I look at our mix of people we interviewed across both students and employees, they were about 46% who were between 18 and 35 years of age. And if I compare the same statistic with a country like Japan, only 30% of respondents were between that age. So clearly, we had a much younger population, which is reflected in our survey respondent base. And as you're younger, your ability to pick up technology is also faster. And if you looked at the survey, we are calling this generation AI. So people who've been born in 2000 and beyond, who've been used to a lot of technology, who've been used to voice technology, automated technology. So that's one part. I think the second element is as we think about the social and the economic construct in India, people clearly see technology as a way to get better life outcomes. So when they see something which they think can help them, leapfrog, get better training, get into a better institute, for example, if you're a student, or score more, I think Indians just generally take to that with both arms.
I see. I love this generation AI term. We've been sort of scratching our heads around that for a while now. But would it be fair to say that young in the country are really pushing for growth and adoption of AI even in offices? Even your own survey, for example, talks about how newer people in the organization, freshers' adoption compared to the seniors is much, much higher. The seniors either don't know about it or are wary of it.
So I think clearly the younger generation is, and again, the survey reports also show that the younger generation seems to be more adaptive than the top management because they see it, as I said, get their tasks done faster, be more creative in their outputs, have better quality. So clearly they are pushing. But I think as we work with organizations across industries, we also see a clear realization of the impact that this technology is having, whether it's on revenues, whether it's on reducing costs, whether it's on improving processes or your efficiencies, or it's about getting into new products, or it's about enhancing innovation. So we clearly see a resonance amongst each of these elements from the top management, and the adoption by companies across industries is significantly increasing.
Anjani, tell us which sectors in India are we seeing the most interesting, you define that, the most interesting growth in?
So clearly, the sector which we found the maximum adoption is the sector that you belong to, which is media. So if you look at some of the use cases that are being created or being used in media, it could be content creation, it could be writing scripts, it could be advertising creation, it could be analyzing user preferences, delivering personalized content. All of those are areas that we are seeing media companies really adopt to Gen AI. I think the related industry, if I talk about technology, product companies, IT-enabled services companies, they are also seeing a large adoption. And one of the biggest use cases is writing code. It's testing code. It's your
Yeah.
software development lifecycle documentation. So all of these somewhat mundane tasks are being automated using GenAI. The other area that we really found interesting in our discussions, not just the study, is the government of India. I think the government of India is doing a fantastic job in terms of adopting GenAI. So, for example, providing citizen services. There's a chatbot that they use called Jugalbandi. So, if you're a farmer in Haryana, you can actually listen to the government speak in your native language. And it's a chatbot, so you don't even have to be literate. You can just ask questions.
Interesting. So clearly, Anjani, there are lots of use cases, lots of ways in which Chat GPT or in fact Gen AI, in a sense, can sort out our life. But one can't ignore the flip side to that as well. Also, one of the Gen AIs that we talk about is deepfake, an outcome of that. Just as an example, how do you see that, the downside of Gen AI?
So, one of the ways we found it helpful to think about AI and Gen AI. So think about it as a new employee. As you hire a new employee and you train her in your organization about your policies, about the work that she has to do, and you don't take her outcome at face value. There is somebody who's training her, there's somebody who's mentoring her, there is somebody who's looking at her output and then saying, this change has to be made. Then you constantly keep on sending her for training. Gen AI is exactly like that. You have to treat those models like an employee that needs coaching, that needs mentoring, that needs training, that needs fine-tuning. But once you've done that in your own environment, with your own data, with the right set of guardrails, I think the benefits far outweigh the challenges that we are seeing.
Anjani, thank you. Anjani is almost repeating, Sonal, the advice you were talking about a little earlier, how you need to use ChatGPT, AI, generative AI as assistive. Let's move on from this now to the other big question around Gen AI. You often hear one of these very loud opinions, which is Gen AI will steal the jobs of artists and creatives. So to understand more about this way of thinking, we thought we'd go over to the digital creator Prateek Arora. Prateek uses generative AI to create these incredible Indo-futuristic, that's how he describes it, these incredible worlds. So let's just go over to him. Hi Prateek, good morning. Prateek, tell us maybe the best way to describe your work, though it's something quite unseen, I think, for a lot of our audiences, but maybe we could describe it as Indian futuristic comics. Tell us, what were your inspirations? How did you create this almost very unique amalgamation?
One of the key inspirations was how, let's say, Stan Lee back in the 60s in New York crystallized this whole moment around like Marvel Comics and created so many sort of memorable stories and iconic characters and a community around that. And I realized that we don't really have that in India, but also the answer can't be exactly like comic books because we don't have that kind of culture of comic books in India, at least anymore. Maybe the last time we had it was like Raj Comics. So it had been a while of thinking about, okay, if you like this kind of storytelling, you think more people can possibly like it, but you have to find a different way to do it because it's not going to happen in the mainstream way of getting like a film produced or a series done even after OTT because it just feels so new to everyone. So I think the understanding was that you need to find almost like a sort of a different pathway and, take some inspiration from tech and how startups do it and how they kind of incubate new things. And ultimately it was like, okay, I needed a new medium to tell this kind of story in a way that I can do it almost online and kind of build my own community around it. And around that time, when I learned of the sort of existence of AI tools, specifically something called Midjourney, I was like, this could really be it. So let me try. And that's really where it began. That's really where it began for me.
Yeah. All right, Prateek, Midjourney clearly is everybody's favorite at the moment. But for our viewers, tell us, how exactly does art work with AI? Are there prompts? Is it like writing a novel, giving a prompt to Gen AI to visualize a world you want to see? How does it work?
That's a great question, honestly, a very relevant question, and also a popular understanding or rather misunderstanding that it's, the machine's doing all the work. My perspective is pretty sort of simple and clear that, look, it's a tool, like a camera is a tool or Photoshop is a tool. What I think is uncomfortable to people is that it's a new kind of tool and you can't really one-to-one compare it with anything that has existed so far. For me personally, it starts with a story. It's always started with a story that, look, there is a story that I want to tell. There is a character I want to bring into, like, I've imagined I want to bring into like visual media, or there's a world that I want to build around a concept or a theme that I like. And it starts with that. So the image generation part of it is sort of one part of it, right? Before that, you have to like do a lot of thinking about what you're really trying to say with it. Then once you figure out, okay, this is my story, you bring it into a sort of image generation tool like Midjourney, where it does, in the most elemental way, yes, you give it a text prompt, and then it generates an image based on that text prompt. But two things. One, that text prompt, even though it's not, I don't think it's solidified into its own skill yet, but it's starting to, because the output, and I'm not even saying quality, but just subjective output that people are getting from the same softwares is like dramatically different. So there's definitely something else going on there. How I think of it is like, it's like almost like being a writer's advantage is there, because you're writing a short script, essentially. You're writing a script for an image. So if you say that that's not valuable, it's like saying, hey, you should make a film directly from on the set and the screenplay is not valuable, right? Like there's a lot of thinking that goes into the moment before you generate.
Prateek, tell us, there is this sort of nihilistic way almost of thinking that AI will take away artists' jobs. You're an artist, you use AI. Tell us, how do you see this way of thinking?
Okay, so I think that's again, important question with no simple answer. At least there's no consensus among the broad artistic community on what they think about it, many points of view. Here's my point of view, right? I think AI is a new medium. It is a new medium, as like photography or filmmaking was a new medium, and neither of those replaced painting, for example, because, just a great example of this is that every single time there is a really starkly new way of making art, there's a lot of, worry around it. And there's enough historical evidence for it, right? So for example, when the camera came out for the first time, there was a bit of a panic in the painting community because they were like, okay, where a lot of painters were employed to make portraits at that point in time. But then they were like, okay, now we don't get to make any portraits. And sure, some of that happened, but also, and if you go back and read things from the time, it also in some ways, and some people say that it freed up painting beyond its purely utilitarian uses and led to many art movements that came out as a response to the creation of photography, including like Impressionism, right? When they didn't have to just capture reality exactly as it is, it was liberating. So for me, AI art, AI imaging, AI as a creative medium is a new medium, which is not painting, is not photography, even though some of it may look like that. It's a whole new medium, right? And I think we're still figuring out the semantics and how to define or describe it exactly. That said, when you come to the industry context, right? Now, there are certain specific use cases where AI is already starting to disrupt the current like production workflows or creation workflows. And that is a valid concern.
Prateek, a really engaging conversation, but I want to understand this. Then would it be fair to say that what you do with, what artists do with Gen AI is sort of asking them to produce what's really going inside your brain? For example, your theme seems to be Indo-futuristic, so to say. That's really your universe. Would that be fair to say? Is that how you're building it?
Okay, so I think a lot of it is just very directly inspired by things I'm seeing around me. I know that science fiction is supposed to be futuristic, but I think it's even more interesting when you kind of use it to talk about what's going on right now. And to me, the biggest story, or one of the biggest stories of just our life and times, especially in India, is that technology is like permeating every part of life and changing everything, especially since like let's say the big geo moment that happened a few years ago and like hundreds of million people have come online. Yet we're not seeing, we're seeing so many stories about all the changes in India getting told in so many great ways, but we're not seeing the story of technology being told almost at all, right? Either in a more directly realistic way or in a more imaginative, fictional way, right? And I think both are important. So I think it was about, hey, I'm seeing all of this interesting change around me, and then there's this new visual medium that I've kind of stumbled into. So maybe that speaks to me. So maybe I can use it to talk about that stuff, because it doesn't seem like we really are talking about that stuff. So that's one. And second, I think it's also just a lifelong love for science fiction and a desire to make it find acceptance in India broadly as pop culture, and more specifically in like Mumbai or the other centers of entertainment in the country. So we were also driven by that objective of how do you make this genre that so far people say feels like foreign or alien or not Indian enough, feel like something that came from like the ground up, versus something that was imposed by like some major conglomerate and is derivative of something we've seen in the West, right? So it was really driven by a desire to like find that texture of like Indian sci-fi.
Prateek, thank you for joining us and bringing us all of these insights this early in the morning. That creative Indian flavor, we love that point. Okay, with that creative